She fainted at a party, woke up in the Mafia Boss's arms, with him whispering, "Ours." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to the main character. I didn't belong at that party, and I knew at the moment I stepped onto the marble floor and felt the bass of the music vibrate up through my shoes like a warning. I was Emily Carter, a +1 who had said yes because it felt safer than saying no, a borrowed dress, a borrowed smile, and a borrowed confidence that thinned with every step. The room was a study in quiet power, tailored suits, measured laughter, watches that caught the light when hands moved just enough to be noticed. I kept my glass steady, counted breaths, and told myself it was only a few hours, 60 minutes of small talk, a mile-long walk back to normal life once it ended. Then I felt the heat of attention, not the loud kind, not the kind that scans and consumes, but the kind that settles, patient and exact. When I looked up, I saw him across the room, Adrian Cole, though I didn't know his name yet. Only the gravity of his presence, the way conversations curved around him like a river around stone. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply looked, and somehow the room felt quieter for it. I tried to laugh at a joke that wasn't funny, tried to sip champagne that suddenly tasted sharp, and that was when the edges of the room softened, like someone had turned down the focus. My heart skipped, then hurried, then settled into a strange, uneven rhythm. I remember thinking I should sit, that the exit was maybe 30 feet away, that I could count the steps if I needed to. I remember a hand reaching for my elbow, the smell of clean fabric and winter air, and then the floor rushed up in a blur of light. When I woke, I expected white walls, a clipboard, a voice asking me my date of birth. Instead, I was held, not tight, not loose, but certain, arms steady as if they had always been meant to be there. I opened my eyes to a ceiling traced with soft light and felt a calm that didn't make sense yet insisted on staying. He was close enough that I could hear his breathing, slow, controlled, the kind of quiet that comes from knowing the rules of a room and owning them. "Easy," he said, and the word landed like a promise rather than an order. I tried to pull back, to apologize, to gather myself into something smaller, but his hold adjusted, not restricting, just keeping me upright, keeping me safe. People hovered at a respectful distance, giving him space as naturally as they gave him attention. That was when he leaned closer, his voice low, not meant for anyone else, and whispered a single word that changed the temperature of the air around me. "Ours." I didn't understand it then, not the meaning or the weight, only that it wasn't a claim shouted into the room but a boundary drawn in ink, quiet and permanent. As my feet found the floor and the world steadied, I realized something else too, that whatever had just happened had placed me at the center of a map I'd never seen before, and that the man who held me wasn't asking permission to keep me safe. He was informing the room that I already was. I realized very quickly that fainting did not excuse me from consequences, not in a room like that, and not with a man like him. Adrian did not ask if I was all right in the way people usually do, with panic or noise. He waited until my breathing matched his, until the room stopped tilting, until I could stand without my knees shaking. Only then did he release me, just enough to prove that he could. Someone pressed a glass of water into my hand. Another person murmured that the music would be lowered, and I noticed how all of it happened without Adrian raising his voice. He turned slightly, not leaving my side, and the room adjusted around us like it had been rehearsed. I should have thanked him and walked away. That was the sensible choice. That was the version of myself I trusted, the one who kept her head down and her plans small. Instead, I looked up at him and asked the only question that felt honest. "Why did you say that?" He studied me for a second, his expression unreadable, then answered without hesitation. "Because it is accurate." I did not like how calm he sounded, or how the word "ours" still echoed in my chest like a bell that had been struck once and left ringing. I told him I needed air. He nodded and gestured toward a side corridor that led to a terrace, already cleared, already quiet. The night outside was cool, the city spread below us in a grid of light. Traffic moving like veins carrying something vital and unseen. I took a breath and felt steadier, more myself, until I noticed he had positioned himself just close enough that no one else could pass between us. You should let me go back inside, I said, keeping my voice even. I can handle myself. He did not argue. He said, I know you can. That was worse. He explained without explaining, choosing his words carefully. You collapsed in a room where attention is currency. That makes you visible. Visibility creates questions. Questions attract people who do not deserve answers. I told him I was nobody. He smiled then, just barely, like he found the idea charming. Nobody does not faint in my space and wake up in my arms. I felt heat rise to my face. Anger and embarrassment braided together. This is not your space, I said. It is a party. It is a building. It is not me. He looked at the city again, then back at me. Territory is not always land. Sometimes it is responsibility. That was the moment I understood the difference between power that demands and power that decides. He was not threatening me. He was informing me. I asked him his name. Adrian Cole, he said, and waited. Emily Carter, I replied, and watched his attention sharpen, as if the exchange itself had weight. He did not repeat my name. He did not need to. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement inside. People checking watches, conversations resuming without us. Life going on. I realized that if I walked back in alone, something would change, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough to matter. If I stayed with him, something else would change. I asked him what he expected from me. He did not answer right away. I expect you to let me take you home tonight, he said finally. Not because you owe me. Because it is safer than pretending this did not happen. I crossed my arms, considering the distance between us, the height of the railing, the miles of city that felt suddenly closer than the exit behind me. And despite every instinct I had trained to keep myself small, I nodded once. Just tonight, I said. Adrian inclined his head, a gesture that felt like agreement and warning at the same time. Of course, Emily, he said. Tonight is enough. I rode down in the elevator with Adrian Cole without speaking, the quiet thick, but not uncomfortable, the kind that comes when words would only make things smaller. The doors opened to a private drive where a dark sedan waited, polished, unmarked, ordinary in a way that felt deliberate. He opened the door for me and waited, not rushing, not touching, giving me the space to choose even as the choice narrowed. Inside, the car smelled faintly of clean leather and night air. As we pulled away, the city slid past the windows in steady lines, familiar streets rearranged by perspective. I told myself I would remember every turn, every landmark, as if geography could keep me anchored. Adrian sat across from me, not crowding, his attention present without pressing. You can stop this at any point, he said, as if reading the tension in my shoulders. I nodded, grateful and suspicious all at once. We crossed the river and the noise softened, buildings giving way to quieter blocks, streetlights spaced farther apart. When we stopped, it was not a fortress or a spectacle but a townhouse set back from the street, understated, lights warm behind glass. Inside, the space was calm and ordered, art chosen with restraint, furniture placed with intention. He offered me water and a seat, then stepped away to make a call in a low voice I could not hear, the words clipped, controlled. I noticed how the house seemed to respond to him, doors opening without sound, lights adjusting as if anticipating his movement. When he returned, he said, "You will stay in the guest room tonight." Nothing more. The certainty of it settled my nerves more than any reassurance could have. The room was comfortable, the bed neatly made, a folded sweater placed on the chair as if someone had thought ahead. I changed and sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the city hum beyond the window, trying to understand how quickly a night could redraw the edges of a life. A knock came, gentle, precise. Adrian stood in the doorway, not crossing the threshold. "There is something you should know," he said. I waited. Being seen with me tonight means you are already part of a conversation you did not start. That does not mean you are trapped. It means I will answer questions before they reach you. I asked him what questions. He shook his head, the kind that do not ask politely. The way he said it was calm, not alarming, and that made it heavier. I told him I had a job, an apartment, a routine that depended on predictability. He listened without interrupting, then said, "All of that remains yours. I am not interested in taking what is not offered." I asked him why he cared. He considered the question, then answered honestly. Because when I decide something is mine, I protect it. The word landed with weight, familiar now, less shocking, more exact. I slept lightly, dreams skimming the surface of wakefulness, the sense of being watched replaced by the steadier feeling of being guarded. In the morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, the house quiet but alive. Breakfast waited on the table, simple and warm, a note beside it in careful handwriting telling me I could leave whenever I wished. I ate slowly, listening for sounds, finding none that felt intrusive. When Adrian appeared, dressed for the day, he asked if I wanted to be driven home or if I preferred to walk a few blocks first. The option felt like a gift. Outside, the air was crisp, the city ordinary again, and for a moment I almost believed the night had been a dream. At the corner, I stopped. "This does not mean anything permanent," I said. He met my gaze and nodded. "It means exactly what it means, Emily. No more. No less." As I walked away, I felt the truth of it settle in my chest. Not fear, not relief, but the understanding that something had shifted, quietly, and that the man behind me would not chase, would not call, would simply remain where he was, certain that whatever came next would find its way back. I thought distance would dilute what had happened, that routine would smooth the edges until the night became a story, I told myself with less certainty. It did not work that way. The days that followed felt normal in shape, but altered in weight. Like furniture moved an inch to the left, so you kept reaching wrong. At work, emails arrived answered. Meetings started on time. Coffee tasted like coffee, and yet I noticed small interruptions that did not announce themselves. A car idled too long across the street when I left my building. A delivery arrived addressed to Emily Carter with no return name. Inside a book I had mentioned once at the party to someone who did not seem to be listening. I told myself it was coincidence until my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that said simply, "You are being watched because you were noticed, and I am handling it." I did not have to ask who it was. Adrian did not send follow-up texts. He did not ask how I felt about it. He informed me. I called him anyway, stepping into the stairwell to keep my voice private. I told him I did not agree to this, that I had not consented to protection I did not request. He listened, then said, "You agreed to tonight." Tonight had consequences. I asked him to stop. He answered carefully, "I cannot stop other people from paying attention. I can stop what they do with it." The logic irritated me because it was clean. I told him I wanted my life back. He said, "It is still yours." I am standing between it and curiosity. The next time we spoke in person was not planned. I ran into him at a quiet cafe near my office, the kind with scratched tables and a chalkboard menu. And for a second I thought my mind had placed him there out of habit. He looked different without the architecture of power around him, dressed down, reading a newspaper like anyone else. He did not approach until I did, rising when I reached his table, respectful, contained. "Sit," he said, not a command, an invitation. I told him I did not want gifts or drivers or silent watchers. He nodded. "Then we will do this your way," he said. He explained boundaries the way other people explained weather, clearly and without drama. No contact unless necessary. No interference with my work. No surprises. In return, I would tell him when something felt wrong instead of dismissing it. I bristled at the idea of owing him anything. He caught it immediately. "This is not debt, Emily," he said. "It is coordination." I asked him why he was willing to bend. He folded the paper and looked at me with an attention that did not flinch. "Because possession without consent is a liability," he said. "Ours does not mean against your will." The word landed differently then, less like a line drawn and more like a circle offered. I left the cafe with my coffee untouched, heart steady but alert. That night, the idling car did not return. The next delivery came with a receipt and a note that said, "Purchased at your request," even though I had not made one. I called Adrian and told him this was a violation. He apologized without qualifying it and corrected the behavior immediately. The apology mattered more than the correction. It taught me something about the shape of his power, that it adjusted when pressed by principle, not pressure. Weeks passed. We spoke rarely, briefly, always on terms that felt negotiated rather than assumed. And yet, when a late meeting ran long and the streets emptied, I found myself walking without fear, aware of the city in a way that felt supported rather than shadowed. I understood then that my resistance was not to safety but to surrendering authorship. Adrian had not taken it. He had placed it back in my hands and stepped close enough to make sure I did not drop it. That was when I realized the danger was not being claimed. It was realizing how easy it was to choose to stay within reach. It was not the dramatic moments that taught me who Adrian Cole really was. It was the ordinary ones. The way my phone rang at 8 in the morning with his name on the screen and nothing else. No warning, no demand. Just silence until I answered and heard him ask if I had slept well. The way he remembered details without storing them like leverage, my preference for black coffee. The fact that I walked faster when anxious, the bookstore I visited on Sundays because the owner let me read without buying. He did not appear in my life loudly. He adjusted the margins. One afternoon, a meeting was moved at the last minute to a building I rarely visited, and when I arrived, the security desk waved me through with a nod they had not given me before. I noticed. Later, Adrian admitted he had made a call to ensure access would not slow me down. I told him that was interference. He said, "Then tell me when it helps and when it crosses the line." I began to see the machinery behind him not as a threat, but as a system that could be calibrated. That frightened me more than ignorance ever had. We met more often then, always in public, always by my choosing. He did not touch me beyond a brief greeting, did not lower his voice to claim intimacy. And yet, the space between us felt occupied, charged with decisions made and deferred. One evening, we sat on opposite ends of a long bench in a quiet park, the city humming at a distance. I asked him what people thought when they saw me with him. He answered honestly, "They assume you are protected." I asked what that meant for me. He said, "It means some doors will open faster. Some will close quietly." I asked if I could opt out. He considered the question. "You can walk away," he said, "but people do not forget proximity." The truth of that settled in. I told him I did not want to be a symbol or a signal. He nodded. "Then we will make you a variable," he said. "Unpredictable, unrepeatable." I laughed despite myself. He smiled, fuller this time, the expression softening his severity. That was the first night I realized I trusted him, not because he was safe, but because he was precise. The test came sooner than I expected. A colleague invited me to a small gathering after work, nothing formal, a handful of people and takeout containers on a coffee table. I mentioned it to Adrian in passing. He did not comment. An hour into the evening, my phone buzzed with a message from him asking if I wanted a ride home. I replied no. 10 minutes later, another message arrived, not from him, but from a number I did not recognize, asking a question about my work that felt too specific to be casual. I felt the air change, the way you do when a storm shifts direction. I stepped outside and called Adrian. He answered immediately. "Stay where you are," he said. I told him not to come. He did not argue. He asked for the address and ended the call. 20 minutes later, the message thread went silent. Adrian did not appear. When I asked him what he had done, he said, "I clarified assumptions." I pressed for details. He refused. Not because he wanted secrecy, but because he understood that knowing would cost me something I did not want to pay. That night, I lay awake considering the shape of protection again, the invisible lines being drawn and erased on my behalf. In the morning, I told him I needed to know where the line was. He met me for breakfast and said, "The line is where you say stop and I listen. If I ever do not, you leave." Simple, brutal, fair. I realized then that the power dynamic I feared had shifted without me noticing. He was not holding me in place. He was building around me and asking me where the doors should be. And in that quiet exchange, without ceremony or promise, I understood that whatever ours meant, it was no longer something he had whispered. It was something we were negotiating, sentence by sentence, boundary by boundary, with eyes open and voices steady. There was a moment when the careful balance we had built stopped feeling theoretical and became personal. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that begins with rain and ends with takeout containers stacked by the sink. I was leaving work later than usual when my phone rang with Adrian's name on the screen. He did not ask where I was. He asked if I felt tired. The question caught me off guard because it was not strategic. It was human. I said yes. He said he was nearby and asked if I wanted company for the walk home. I hesitated, measuring independence against the comfort of not being alone. I said I would meet him halfway. When I saw him on the corner, umbrella angled against the rain, the city seemed to make room without noticing. We walked side by side, not touching, our steps matching without effort. He told me about a decision he had delayed because it would affect people he did not know personally, and how that uncertainty bothered him. I listened, surprised by the trust implicit in sharing doubt. At my building, I stopped under the awning and told him I did not want him to come upstairs. He accepted it immediately, no pause, no pressure. "Good night, Emily," he said, and turned away. That restraint mattered more than any grand gesture. The next morning, I woke to a message from him that said, "Let me know if the rain made the stairs slippery." I smiled despite myself. Weeks passed like that, measured and quiet, until one afternoon when the ground shifted again. I received a call from a number I recognized only because Adrian had shown it to me once and told me to answer if it ever appeared. The voice on the other end was polite, professional, and unfamiliar, asking to confirm my availability for a meeting I had not scheduled. I declined. The call ended. Minutes later, Adrian called. He did not apologize. He said, "This is one of those moments." I felt a flicker of fear, quickly replaced by clarity. I told him to explain. He did, in terms that avoided detail but respected my intelligence. Someone had made an assumption about my proximity. Adrian had corrected it, but correction invited curiosity. He wanted to increase distance, temporarily. I asked what that meant. He said fewer appearances together, fewer coincidences, a quieter perimeter. I asked how long. He said until it was boring. I agreed, then surprised myself by asking if he would still check in. He answered without hesitation. Of course. The distance tested us in ways closeness had not. Calls replaced meetings. Messages replaced walks. I learned the cadence of his days by the times he was available, learned to hear the city behind his voice when he called from somewhere elevated and quiet. One night, after a long silence, he asked if I trusted him. I told him trust was not a switch. He said neither was power. "We are both learning," he said. The honesty steadied me. When the distance eased, it did so gradually, without announcement. We met again in public, a bookstore this time, passing notes between shelves like students, our hands brushing by accident, and then not pulling away. Outside, he asked if I was ready to resume normal. I said I wanted one thing first. I wanted to see the place where he made decisions. Not the spectacle, not the guards, just the room. He considered, then agreed. He showed me a simple office with a desk worn smooth at the edges and a wall of windows overlooking the city. He did not sit until I did. "This is where lines are drawn," he said. I told him I wanted my line visible there. He nodded and handed me a pen. "Write it," he said. I wrote my name and the word consent beneath it. He did not smile. He signed below. In that quiet room, with no witnesses and no ceremony, something settled between us. It was not romance in the way stories promise. It was alignment. It was the understanding that the safest place I had found was not behind him or under his protection, but beside him, where my voice carried weight and my presence was chosen, not assumed. That was the night I stopped wondering what ours meant and started understanding how it would be lived. The warning signs arrived quietly, the way meaningful changes always did with Adrian, through absence rather than alarm. He missed a scheduled call without explanation, then sent a brief message hours later saying he was delayed and that I should not alter my plans. The phrasing mattered. Not be careful, not stay home, do not alter. I went about my evening with deliberate normalcy, grocery shopping, answering messages, cooking a simple dinner, but I felt the city watching differently, like a lens had tightened. When I stepped outside to take out the trash, a man across the street looked up too quickly, then away, as if correcting a mistake. I did not panic. I went inside and locked the door, then waited. Adrian called just before midnight. His voice was steady but thinner, like it had been pulled through decisions. "There is a situation," he said. "Not with you. Near you." I asked what that meant. He said someone had misread the quiet as permission to test proximity. I asked if I was safe. He said yes without hesitation. I asked how he knew. He paused, then said, "Because I am not guessing." I wanted details and he knew it, but he did not offer them. Instead, he gave me instructions that felt like respect rather than control. Stay where you are. Do not answer unknown numbers. If you feel watched, tell me immediately. I did not argue. I trusted the tone more than the content. The next day, the city felt normal again, too normal, as if it were overcompensating. Adrian did not appear, did not send flowers or drivers or apologies. He sent a single message at noon asking if my schedule had changed. I replied no. He replied good. That night, I dreamed of rooms without windows and woke with my heart racing, the residue of fear clinging without explanation. I called him before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me what you felt," he said. I told him everything. The man on the street, the dream, the sense of being tested without knowing the rules. He listened and then said something that surprised me. "You are allowed to be afraid. It does not make you weak. It makes you accurate." I asked him if this was the cost of being near him. He did not deflect. He said, "It is the cost of being visible to systems that do not like ambiguity." I asked if he regretted bringing me into it. He answered immediately, "No, I regret that you did not choose visibility with full information." That mattered. The honesty did not erase the fear, but it gave it shape. 2 days later, we met in a public place, crowded and bright. Adrian looked tired, not physically, but in the way of someone who had carried weight without setting it down. He did not touch me. He did not lower his voice. He asked if I wanted to leave the city for a while. The offer was careful, framed as an option, not a solution. I asked if leaving would resolve anything. He shook his head. It would signal avoidance. Staying signals confidence. I told him confidence felt expensive right now. He nodded. "Then let me spend it," he said quietly. I asked him what he had done. He did not answer directly. He said the misunderstanding had been corrected, not with force, but with clarity, the kind that made repetition unappealing. I pressed him. He held my gaze. "Nothing happened that would keep me awake at night," he said. I believed him because he knew the difference. As we parted, he asked if I still wanted space. I surprised myself by saying no. Not because the danger was gone, but because distance no longer felt like safety. Walking home, I realized the shift had already occurred. The fear had not driven me away. It had drawn a line that I chose to stand behind, not because Adrian stood there too, but because I had decided that uncertainty would not be the author of my choices. That was the quiet victory of the moment. Not the absence of threat, but the presence of agency, steady and unafraid, even as the city breathed around us and watched to see what we would do next. The choice arrived without drama, which was how I knew it was real. Adrian did not frame it as a crossroads or a test. He invited me to dinner at a quiet restaurant I loved, the kind with small tables and a menu that did not change to impress anyone. When he arrived, he looked settled, not relieved, not tense, as if something internal had resolved. We ate and talked about ordinary things, a book I was reading, a building renovation near his office, the way the city smelled different after rain. Only when dessert arrived did he speak about what mattered. "I am adjusting my world," he said, and waited to see if I would interrupt. I did not. There are parts of it that will never be public, but there are parts one can make transparent to you if you choose to stay close. If you choose distance, I will respect it and restructure accordingly. The language was careful, the offer balanced. I asked him what staying close meant now that we both understood the costs. He answered without rehearsed certainty. "It means coordination becomes collaboration. It means you will know when decisions brush against your life before they happen. It means I will ask, even when asking is inconvenient." I asked him what distance meant. He said fewer intersections, fewer explanations, fewer risks shared. Both options sounded heavy. I realized then that I was not choosing between safety and danger. I was choosing between silence and participation. I told him I needed time. He nodded and paid the check without protest. Outside, the night was calm, the city moving at its usual pace, unaware of the weight of small decisions being made on its sidewalks. We walked a block together and stopped. Adrian did not reach for me. He did not ask for reassurance. He said, "Whatever you decide will be honored." That was not a promise. It was policy. I went home and sat by the window, watching lights blink on and off across the river, considering the version of myself that had always chosen distance because it felt neutral, uninvolved, safe. That version had served me well until it had not. I thought about the moments Adrian had stepped back when stepping forward would have been easier, about the way he had listened when I said stop and adjusted without resentment. I thought about the cost of being adjacent to power without a voice. By morning, the answer felt quiet and firm. I called him before work. "Meet me where it started," I said. "The cafe near my office." He arrived first, already seated, hands folded, eyes attentive. I told him my decision without framing it as surrender. I said I would stay close, but only on terms that preserve my authorship. He listened, then asked me to define those terms. I did. No decisions about my life without my knowledge. No protection that erased my agency. No secrets kept to manage my emotions. He did not negotiate. He agreed. Then he added his own condition. If staying close ever costs you peace beyond what you can carry, you will tell me, and we will adjust, even if adjustment means distance. I agreed. The relief that followed surprised me. It was not romantic. It was structural, like a building finally aligned with its foundation. Over the weeks that followed, the collaboration took shape. I was invited into rooms not to impress me, but to inform me. Adrian asked my opinion and accepted it when it differed from his. He changed plans because of conversations we had, not because of obligation, but because alignment made outcomes stronger. The city noticed the shift in subtle ways. Invitations changed tone. Curiosity cooled. The perimeter grew boring, as promised. One evening, as we walked along the river, he stopped and looked at me with that familiar precision, softened now by something like ease. Ours is not ownership, he said. It is accountability. I nodded, understanding finally what the word had always meant in his mouth. Not possession, not a cage, but a shared responsibility to choose each other with eyes open. When he took my hand, it was not a claim. It was a confirmation. And for the first time since the night I fainted under borrowed lights, I felt steady not because I was protected, but because I was participating, fully present in a life that no longer felt borrowed at all. The ending did not arrive with fireworks or declarations. It arrived the way real conclusions do, through repetition that no longer felt heavy. Months passed, then another season turned, and the city learned our rhythm without being invited to comment. Adrian and I moved through our days with a quiet confidence that no longer needed to be negotiated. He kept his world ordered and opaque where it needed to be, and transparent where it touched mine. I kept my life intact, my work unchanged, my friendship steady, my sense of self no longer provisional. We did not merge lives so much as align them. Two parallel lines choosing to run close enough to matter. The final test came disguised as opportunity. I was offered a role that required public visibility, panels, interviews, photographs that would circulate without context. I brought it to Adrian not as a request, but as information. He listened and asked questions that surprised me, about what I wanted to say, how I wanted to be seen, what success would look like on my terms. When I asked him if it complicated his world, he did not pretend otherwise. It does, he said, but complication is not prohibition. I watched him choose me again, not by stepping in front, but by stepping aside and making room. The interviews went well. Curiosity flared and then faded, as it always did when not fed by mystery. The perimeter held. One evening after a long day, we stood on the terrace of his office, the city spread below us like a living map. Adrian rested his forearms on the railing, relaxed in a way I had not seen when we first met. You know, he said, there was a time when I believed control was the same as certainty. I asked him what changed. He looked at me. You asked better questions than my world ever did. I smiled, thinking of the night I had fainted under borrowed lights, how little I had known. Then, I told him I had learned something too, that safety built without consent always collects interest. He nodded, accepting the truth without defensiveness. We stood there in silence, the kind that no longer felt like a pause waiting to be filled. When he took my hand, it was familiar now, steady, neither tentative nor claiming. I realized then that the story people would tell about us would never be accurate. They would call it power or protection or possession because those were the words they had. They would miss the quieter truth, that what we had built was not a shelter from the world but a way of standing in it without shrinking. Later, as we walked down to the street, someone called Adrian's name from across the way, and he acknowledged them with a nod that did not pull him away from me. He squeezed my hand once, a habit we had developed without naming it, a signal that said present, aligned, chosen. I thought about the word he had whispered the first night, how it had startled me with its certainty. Ours had not been a claim after all. It had been a forecast, not of ownership, but of shared responsibility, not of a cage, but of a boundary we agreed to draw together. As we crossed the street, the light changed, and we moved with the crowd, ordinary among strangers, invisible in the best possible way. I did not look back. I did not need to. Whatever the city might demand next, whatever questions it might pose, I knew how we would answer them. Not with noise or force or spectacle, but with the quiet authority of two people who had chosen alignment over fear, consent over control, and a shared path over borrowed safety. And in that choice, repeated every day without ceremony, I finally understood that the most powerful thing Adrian Cole had ever given me was not protection, but the space to stand beside him and say, with absolute clarity, "This is ours, because we chose it."